probably one of the toughest messages to share, especially with a society that likes to revive itself every 5 minutes. You know, I mean, you hear it regularly, don't you, in different formats, different formulas. Every summer there's a revival meeting, or every certain time of the year you find, you know, there's either a Billy Graham revival or a Great Glory revival or some other giant, you know, ministry going out to have a revival. You know, kind of like do it again and again and again. Well, I don't know about you, but, you know, I think if you take, you know, like these prongs, you know, that they talk about when you have a, you know, electrocardio, you know, stimulant, you know, that you're going to cause someone to be revived, you know, from death, you know, that their body is laying there and their heart is stopped, and you need to give them a shock. You know, you put one paddle down, you know, and you put another paddle to the side, and basically what happens is electricity runs down through one paddle, through the heart, or through the body, actually, and then out through the, you know, and it's the nerve endings also, and it goes out to the other paddle, and it kind of shocks the heart into going. Well, that's kind of what reviving someone from the dead is all about. Now, unfortunately in America, it's more like, you know, we have a lot of babies that need burping, you know, and they need their little pablum to be burped up because they have indigestion. Oh, they don't feel good. I'm having a heart attack because I have gas. And I think in America, really, what happens more often than not with what's going on in our society is we've got indigestion because we've been eating some things maybe we shouldn't have been eating, doing some things like, you know, sitting around and doing things that maybe we shouldn't have been doing. We got kind of fat and sassy as Christians, you know, and kind of neglected the things that God really wanted us to do. So I don't know about you, but, you know, I pray for persecution. Really, I'm serious. I pray that God would persecute the church, or let's put it in a better word, because I know that sounds a little contrary to most theological perspectives, and that God will not persecute his church. Well, no, he won't. He'll chastise it. But let's just put it into a way you understand. Persecute the church. No, really. I mean, the only way that I really see that there is a true or an accurate, let's just say a greater understanding that we are under persecution is when real persecution hits. And I don't mean the kind that, you know, people are saying, oh, well, we're persecuted because we don't get to pray in church. That is not persecution. That's a baby having its bottle taken away, and it's time to grow up and get to where Jesus said, get out of the church, go into your prayer closet and pray in secret. I mean, the stupidity of the argument of praying in school is so dumb, I don't know how you can take Matthew and look at the scriptures themselves and turn around and say, oh, well, we are being persecuted because we don't get to pray in public school anymore. Then do what Jesus said instead. Excuse me, hello, wake up, smell the roses. That's what Jesus said. Don't pray to be seen. Go in secret. So, quite a bit of what people claim their name to fame or shame or whatever you want to call it in Christianity and evangelical Christianity really is off target and off center of what Jesus said or what Jesus did. Matter of fact, Jesus didn't pay too much attention about the political environment he was in. He, matter of fact, not only witnessed to everyone, he shared with the Roman centurion. One centurion, get it? Picture here, you know, kind of like connection. Well, it's not just rhyming, but God has timing when it comes to dealing with his church, with his people, with the reality of doing what he said to do. I personally can't understand anyone wanting to pray for revival. I wouldn't want this mess that I see to be revived. I'd rather like some streamlining, you know. I could see, you know, maybe some branches cut off, you know. I'd like to cut off some branches myself, you know. I'm a gardener, you know. Hey, let's bear some fruit, you know. You think maybe we could clip off a few of these dead branches here, you know? Is it time yet? You know, well, okay, you know, let it go for now. But I don't see in my study of the scriptures anywhere, especially being very, 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 can I say very again? Very, very, very knowledgeable of end times and eschatology. I mean, I cut my teeth on that when I got saved. That was the first thing we were taught. We were taught Jesus is coming almost as much as we were taught John 3:16. Might have been taught Jesus is coming more. And we had a lot of people growing up at that time, like Hal Lindsey and, you know, Chuck Missler and all these people that were like dynamic, you know, teaching us those things that we could look at and see. It's time. This generation will not pass away. And dare I say, it's even closer than what we thought before. It will be this generation, trust me. You may not understand it yet, but it's happening right before your eyes. And so, I don't see any great revival coming. No offense to all those that want it, all those that plan it, all those that seek it, and all those that choose to make it happen. Oh, I do believe that in other countries there's a revival happening, you know, in places especially maybe that had been dead, you know, like in Europe, you know, that had really fallen so far away that it was like complete apostasy. And now God is bringing them back. Like, or in Australia, when we saw, wow, great revival happening in Australia. Or now we see in China, great revival happening in China. You know, places where the church is persecuted. Or like in Africa, you know, like now we see great teachings going on, great leadership happening, where, you know, the church is being persecuted. You know, and other places in the world where the church is being persecuted, that we see great revivals happening. Funny how that's not working in America, is it? I don't know about you, but I pray that we get persecuted, because it ain't happening. Spiritually, you could say there's a certain amount of confrontation or deception going on. I like to say the spirit of Antichrist is like alive and well and living in the United States and building up an army, because he is, very much so. One pastor recently said, and I thought about it, and I had to pray about it, because I really had to put it in perspective, because it bugged me. You know, and I hate it when pastors say something, because they might be right. And they might be wrong. And if they're wrong, I'm going to get them. You know, put them in a chokehold. You know, choke them out. Knock them out so that, you know, they get to work. No, but, you know, I mean, you know, I heard this message, and I kind of thought, you know, that America was the largest exporter of, you know, false teaching. It wasn't like it was hard for me to jump on that bandwagon, you know, because obviously, emotionally, I'd love to, you know. Devotionally, I could say, well, you know, but my perspective is that we are the nation that God shed His grace on, and that God is using this nation to do what the Jew did not do. And the Jew did what he did while he was doing what he done, because that's how we got what we began with until the Son came. And the Jew did what he did was to have and preserve for us the Torah, the Bible. Basically, you could say the Old Testament, the Law and the Prophets, or the Law of the Prophets and the Writings, or the Ketuvim and the, you know, anyways, you get the picture. Then when Jesus came, you know, he used the Roman Empire, you know, to literally evangelize the world, you know, and it went out to the world. And now if you saw it through church history, it started in Jerusalem, went out to, we could say, Corinth, and, you know, to, you know, Turkey, and to those countries, you know, that were around that area and environment. Then it was transferred, you could say the center of accomplishment, or the center of what was happening in the world with church history, was in Rome. And then from Rome it went out to, we'll say, France, you know, possibly France, and kind of like, you know, Luther, that kind of experience going on. And then to England, and from England to maybe Belgium, Germany, and then from Belgium, Germany over to back and forth between England and those two. We're never quite sure which one happened first or second. You know, but then from there, you know, over to not America right away, but, you know, some other countries, and then America finally. And in the latter days, America sends out more missionaries than any other country in the world. So, on one hand, I like to remind myself of the tradition of church history, you know, and how God has used, even in its structure and destructive nature of itself, you know, such as it is, church history to accomplish His purposes in the world, which is the gospel. and all the other junk that goes along with it. You need to cut off some branches. You need to cut them branches. I keep saying, cut them branches. But also, we see in the world how God used those nations. And now, he's still not forsaking them, but now he's reviving them in a lot of ways. You know, even England, you know, I saw where it had gone so far away, now it's being brought back, you know. And I see like even like West Coast, East Coast thing. It's kind of like, you know, East Coast was like, you know, the start of, you know, like, oh, everything was happening East Coast, and in Chicago, you know, and like now Chicago's like, you know, center of what? Violence. You know, but Moody Bible Institute and all that stuff was there, you know, or then Billy Graham, you know, down in the South, you know, Bible Belt. Well, the Bible Belt's not so much leadership. And then in the West, you know, in the West, we used to be like, you know, evangelicalism to the max, you know, and then now it's not so much so, you know, because we got Frisco and all the other stuff going bonkers. So now, where did it go, you know? Good question, isn't it? Think about it for a minute. Work that out in your own mindset about where did it go after it left the West Coast. Might tell you something about where we're at and what God is doing in his way of performing that with which he is doing in the world as well as in the person and in the individual. I myself, in my own personal life, recognize, man, am I getting, you know, like into some really deep territory where I'm going. I'm going into like the lion's den of like going to get persecuted. And I've been there before when I was in Jerusalem, but God's sending me out to this place, you know, that I know I don't want to go because I'm going to get persecuted. I know it, you know, and it's going to be customized and stylized just for me. But for you, I question, do you understand that maybe it is in God's plan to be tried, tested, persecuted, challenged, grown up, to get out of your diapers, to get out of the crib, to leave behind the comfort zone, to stand up and stand out and go forward and go about the work that God sent you to do, like the disciples. Go or stay. You see, disciples weren't the most brilliant people in the world. God said go, so they stayed. When they tried to stay, God kicked them out. I mean, let's be honest about what it's all about. God says go, not stay. Go, not stay. As a matter of fact, one of the things that Keith Green used to sing was that if you stay, it should be the exception, not the rule. Romaine used to teach us that, hey, you know what? God never told anyone to sit on your, well, the way he would say it is, God never told anyone to sit on their duff and it was enough. He said, get out and get going and get on with it. Get up, get ready, get gone, you know, or something like that. So I kind of got this whole thing, you know, about, well, we've been sitting on our duffs for a long time now, you know, and it's getting a little rough, you know, because guess what? We're kind of like, you know, re-stirring the pot. We're kind of mixing the ingredients up and saying, well, what's wrong with this stew? What did we not do? How come things are sort of like spiritually off, you know, kind of like we're not like the leadership quality that we used to be? Well, I think the effect of Christianity works better when it's persecuted than when it's blessed. And we see that in the Old Testament with the children of Israel when they got into their comfort zone. And I see that like 20 years ago when things got comfortable on the West Coast. People had money, prosperity. They started buying and flipping houses. Matter of fact, the #1 TV show on television was Flipping Houses. And I began to see a lot of Christians on that show flipping houses, making more and more and more and more money. Prosperity, ministries were like wealthy. And to this day, some of them are prosperous. Now, I like a lean, mean fighting machine, like Dean Joe Green used to be called. You know, he was a lean, mean fighting machine. You know, he's kind of like, he was like a tough football player. But he wasn't lean, and he wasn't mean. Matter of fact, Mean Joe Green, in that commercial that's famous nowadays, showed the tender side. But I see God revealing the other side of his nature when he says, hey, judgment begins at the house of God. Whoom. If judgment begins there, I want mercy. But the reality of going through trials and persecution and realization of the quality of our life, I do bring and I do pray and I do ask that God would bring that to the forefront in your life. You may not like this prayer, but I'm praying for you. I'm telling you, this is what I'm praying for you. You can pray against it. you want to, but I'm just saying I'm talking to God about it. I pray God persecutes you. Okay, let's call it a trial. Let's call it a tribulation. Let's call it a challenge. Let's turn in the book of James when it says, in the first chapter, kind of like in the first verse almost, count it all joy when you fall into diverse trials and tribulations, knowing that the working of your faith produces patience. Let's look there. You want to look there for a minute? Let's go check it out. See what James is all about. Because after all, he was the brother of Jesus, wasn't he? He kind of knew what he was talking about, didn't he? Or is he just kind of like off the wall and not one of those that knows what's going on? I mean, after all, God won't give you anything bigger than you can handle, will he? God won't ever send you someplace you don't want to go. God won't ever make you do anything you don't want to do. As a matter of fact, God's just going to bless whatever it is you choose to do, because after all, he's in there to give you what you want and for you to do what you think you should do according to what you have figured out in your personal time and in the times that you spend alone, and that rather than discover and uncover what it is that God really intended for you, you pretty much put a good stamp, a seal of approval. It is evangelical after all, and we have our King James. Hey, rest my case. We are the anointed of God, aren't we? James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given unto him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. But let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. For a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted, but the rich that he is made low, because as the flower of the grass shall pass away, so too. For the sun is no sooner risen with the burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perishes. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Blessed is the man that endures temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempts he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away with his own lust and enticed. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. Don't tell me we don't need persecution. We do. Don't tell me we don't need trials. We do. Don't tell me we don't need tribulations. We do. Because you see, we've gotten kind of fat and sassy. We're a little brassy about one of the things that we think we can own up and take control over in a free society, the democratic process, by stating we are going to be Christian politicians, Christian nation, Christian this, that, and the other thing. And Jesus never said that. No offense, but I think you've gotten your Christianity mixed up in the wrong place with the wrong thing at the wrong time. Persecution, I pray, will come. I pray that God will allow that to happen in your life so that you will cut out the things that aren't important and stick with what is prioritized. That you'll redeem the time knowing that this is the end of time and that you have no more time left. You're not going to see your grandchildren grow up. You're not going to get your retirement account. You might as well kiss that IRA goodbye, because it ain't going to be there when you die. No offense. When you die, the only one you're going to meet is your Maker. And one of the things that we should realize every day as we live this life is we're at the end of the age. How ought we to live? Going about our own business, doing the things we've always done, getting ourselves so many branches that maybe we're sitting on a branch and that will be cut off. I would rather feel torn between turning to God and crying out to Him in desperation than to be sitting back content with my realization that, oh, I have all the assurances I need. So after all, hey, I'm saved. What do I need to worry about? Let me kick back and cruise. We got news for you from the Jesus freaks, Jesus people of that day. You snooze, you lose. It's over. Because guess what? Many are called, but few are chosen. we ought to revive ourselves from the slumber with which we are in, to waken ourselves, to wake up and pay attention to the times that we live in. We don't need a revival. What we really need is to recognize that we are under and in trials and tribulations. And we need to go forward, proving our faith, not seeking to build more of that which is already ready to fall apart and fail because it's become top-heavy. It doesn't have much root. Matter of fact, it's bending over, and it's going to be crushed by its own heaviness of what is just a bunch of dead branches in what should have been a fruitful vine. He arose and came to his father, and when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy. He will not always chide, neither will he keep his anger forever. He hath not dealt with us after our sins, nor rewarded us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens is high above the earth, so great is his mercy towards them that fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgressions from us. And like as a father pitieth his children, so the Lord pitieth them that fear him. You have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. Yet ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Jesus Christ. Now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. When we understand that God is our Father, then we understand the plan that God has for man. We allow ourselves to be disciplined by God, led by God, filled by God, for God to have mercy on us, for God to give us grace, especially if sin abounds, much more grace. But we also know that because God is our Father, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that also shall he reap. If we sow to the flesh, as we have in the past, as we may be doing in the present, then of that flesh we shall reap destruction and corruption in our own soul, where our emotions will be destroyed, and we will not be sensitive to the things of the Spirit, or sensitized to the people that are being touched by God. If we are caught up in the wealth of the world and not in the health of the poor in spirit, then we have missed the mark when it comes to God causing us to hear what the Spirit is saying in these latter days. We need to be about our Father's business. And what our Father's business was, the gospel. Reaching out and ministering to those who are desperately in need. Not trying to revive something that's ready to die. Not trying to restore something that we thought was of old, great, wonderful examples of faith. Rather, we need to take what we have, what little bit we've got, and do with it what we have and where we know we need to go. We need to get out and get on with what Jesus said. Because even as the disciples sat in Jerusalem, thinking that they had grown the church to such a great degree, God kicked them in the butt and threw them out of the city of God and told them, get out, get on with it, get over it, and get with the program. And so they did. And the city was sacked and destroyed. And how great was the destruction thereof. We, of our own culture, America, need to get out. Get over it. Get on with it. Get doing what God has sent us to do. Because there are people overseas that want what we got, that would like to be blessed as we are. And we need to take that little we have, or much, as we really are the most prosperous nation in the world, and spread that about in doing what God has told us to do. Because, quite frankly, do you want to wind up like a Jew did and miss what the Messiah said to do? The early church was a great success story, but it also had many, many failures along the way. And one of them was sitting in Jerusalem when God told them to go. Will you go? today and do what He's told you to do today? Or is your ministry just, well, as I live my life, along the way, I'll tell somebody something about Jesus?